for sure. I mean, I don't really think a budget was the issue. Again, it was just time constraints, and I get that. But if you're talking about something from, let's say it's something with a low budget, right? There are ways to stylishly get around limited animation, for example, in models. Like, the thing I don't understand is the whole tree talk, right? Is there's those ugly trees in the wild area, and, you know, there's, of course, the side who are like, oh, they're just trees, like, who cares? Like, whatever, it's a tree. But it's like, it's not that hard to make a tree, for one thing. Like, it's not hard to fix a texture. Like, I'm sorry, but it obviously shows where the priority went. But again, like, it's something where, and they probably had, like, in Pokemon Masters, for example, which, you know, probably not the same company, I get it. But, you know, like, they had really nice, like, great art, and it was just like, why can't they just put that in the game, you know? And again, like, if we're just talking about it objectively, like, I know Pokemon, you play it for being Pokemon, and it's totally understandable. But, again, like, the game just, it does not look good. Like, I'm sorry, like, the animations are really overused. And again, I'm not talking about, like, every game takes its shortcuts. Like, don't get me wrong. I played the Trails of series. I've been playing them like non-stop, basically, the whole 3 games since you know, the big old quarantine in March. And those games are developed by a relatively small company by, you know, standards, I think. And they definitely have limited animation. You know, there are scenes where they don't show them and things like that. But the style and the presentation of the game is what sells it, obviously. Like, they find ways to work around the limited animation. And it works. Because you can tell that even though they were working with constraints, they put a lot of love into it. Whereas with Pokemon, it's like they don't even try to get around it. It's just kind of like if you had bad assets, for example, you know, like, there's probably like, first of all, this is an easy one. Like, they have trees in the game that look decent. Like, why even use the bad ones? Like, if your assets are bad, just don't use them, you know? Like, reusing, like, decent ones is better than, you know, putting out ones that are terrible. You know, it was such a simple fix that I just don't understand why they didn't do it, you know? Also, like, I'm ranting and not paying attention, but I don't want another normal type anyway, so it's fine. I already fight this guy, cool. Since, I mean, like, we already have 3 Pokemon, so, like, it's fine if I don't catch somewhere here. Plus, we'll find something interesting, right? Alright, cool. Persian, great. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on Sword and Shield. Again, I, at the time, was, and still am, unemployed when I played it, but again, I only played so long, right, because the gameplay loop is addicting. Like, it's meant to be long-lasting, catch all the Pokemon, all that stuff. But it's impossible to deny that it was incredibly bare-bones and formulaic. I mean, especially once you beat the main story, it's just kind of like, alright, catch all the Pokemon, like, you know, breed your favorite Pokemon. There's, like, the end game was freaking terrible. It was so bad. So bad. Like, especially presentation-wise. Like, I'll never get over... also, I might die here, so I should probably switch out. I'll never get over that one part of the end where, like, Hop throws a Pokeball, and, like, there's not even a Pokeball in his hand. It's so bad. Because, again, there's totally a way to get around, like, limited animation, you know? Like, there are ways to stylishly present things. And, again, just archaically using a throwing animation with, like, no Pokeball, and just, like, you know, these bad turning animations, like, again, it definitely shows, like, a lack of time to polish things. And, again, like, you know, it's Pokemon, like, I get it. It has to meet certain standards and a quota. but that doesn't excuse the game, like, critically, you know? That's what I think, like, people have a right to be upset about, because, like, again, it's not that Pokemon fans are blaming anyone specifically, it's just the nature of how these games work, right? But I don't think it's unreasonable to want and expect certain things from, you know, a franchise this big, right? Because it's definitely frustrating when you can see the potential these games have to look, you know, amazing. You know, that's no secret. Also, I'm gonna get some potions real quick. So, that's my 2 cents. Like, again, I see both sides of the coin. You know, I truly do. It's hard to make a game. I know they're on crunch time. They have to meet Pokemon standards by, you know, not a lot of time. And I get that. And that's just the nature of, you know, big series like that. And presumably a relatively small team by comparison. But I don't think it's an excuse for Sword and Shield to be like they are. I don't think it warrants... I think people have a right to, you know, complain about it and voice their opinion. Again, I think a lot of it goes too far, you know, boycotting the game, things like that. Of course, it's a little extreme. Don't get me wrong. But the fact of the matter is, like, Sword and Shield look like hot garbage in places, and, you know, it's pretty disappointing. You know, every game has had its appeal, and I get that things are never going to be the same as, like, Gen 1, 2, and 3, like, it's just become too big for that, and every game, like I said, has its appeal, even despite its shortcomings. Like, for example, the stories become, you know, more convoluted, especially in, like, you know, X and Y, where it was just like, ugh, freaking Team Flare was just, ugh. They're just not good. And, you know, Jello Apocalypse has an amazing, oh wow, a Haunter, that's cool. Jello Apocalypse, who you might have known him from, like, the This Is Basically series on YouTube. He has a great video. I freaking adore it. Of, let's design a Pokemon game, and it's just so tantalizing how this series could be that, but it isn't. And just for, like, a brief little recap to get you excited about it is, basically, he summarizes it in that, or I'm gonna summarize it, rather, is that it's this cruel world, right, where it's split into 3 different main, like, regions. So there's, like, a water, fire, and grass region. And basically, and this is pretty genius, so instead of there being 2 games in the series, there's 3. And when you choose that, that's the starter you get. So you can kind of make your decision, like, prematurely, which is kind of cool. And, so you choose one of the 3 stars based on the version, right? So you buy the green version or whatever, you get grass, etc. And with each version, you start in that game's area, right? So you start in the forest or grass, water, plains, or whatever, fire area. And the game is free roaming from that point. So you start in that area, and then from there you can either go to, like, the water or the fire area, and then there's an area in the middle, which is like the Elite Four, basically. So what's cool about it is that you can fight the gyms in, like, any order, and it obviously just, like, scales the level with you, which people have been wanting for a long time, but of course that's never going to happen, because Pokemon has a refusal to change. It's one of those classic, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But again, that idea was just amazing. You know, and it had a little more, it was a little more, like, RPG-esque, where, you know, there's actual quests and things like that, of just, like, oh, go find this Pokemon in a cave, and you can fight this gym leader, and there's really cool ideas, like, how, if you, like, did a specific, like, quest, you could, like, opt out of fighting a gym or something like that. And just, you know, a little more, like, world building and stuff, instead of just, like, again, that was the thing about Sword and Shield that was so disappointing. It's just, like, you go to one area and that's it. Like, you think Pokemon, you know, it's this whole world of, like, creatures and characters, and you think you should have fun exploring the world and, like, you know, going back to things. Like, think of how memorable this world is, you know? Oh man, I don't want a Lombre. I already have a water type. Whatever. I'm not doing a very good job of following the Nuzlocke rules, but I don't care. It's fine. I'm having a good time. And that's all that matters. Yeah, but just imagine what the world could be, especially in today's, like, graphical things. And don't even get me started on, like, the graphics of Sun and Moon. Like, ugh. I know, they worked hard on it, and I get that. There are some parts that look really nice. Like, the concept of the area is very cool. Like, I like the whole, like, Wales, Scotland, English setting. But, let's be honest, like, all the towns look the same. Like, you don't do anything in every town. It's just bland. All the NPCs say the same thing over and over. It's just, it could be so much better, you know? And that's what's frustrating about it. And what I wish Pokemon would and could be. Whereas, like, I'm not even interested in the DLC that just came out. Like, I was just kind of like, alright, I played Sword and Shield, I get it. I tried to do a Nuzlocke with some friends, and it's just so slow in the beginning that it's just like... You think by now they would have just done a, oh, have you played a Pokemon game by now? Like, skip the intro kind of thing? No, you just gotta go through the whole boring intro. And it's just not fun. It's just not fun at all. It's kind of sad, because, you know, we grew up with Pokemon for so long, and it pretty much hasn't changed at all. I mean, they've added some good quality of life things, don't get me wrong. Like, I am all for the EXP share. I don't think Pokemon by nature should be a grind-heavy game. I think that's kind of ridiculous to expect that from, you know, a game designed and aimed towards children. You know, maybe when I was a kid, and you had to grind, right? Because the mechanics were so bare bones and, like, blue and red. But that was also a game where you could just, like, win with, like, a Blastoise, which I did. I beat the whole game with a Blastoise. It was very boring, but I was also very bored at the time. And, I don't know. Like, grinding, for one thing, isn't fun. Like, I'm a firm believer, and most of the games have been guilty of this, I think, in terms of, like, leveling. Like, I remember Gold and Silver were just absolute hell when you got to the Elite Four, because all the Pokemon were like level 50, and you can max get to like level 40 if you fought everyone. So I firmly believe that the game should be designed where if you fight every trainer, or most of every trainer, you will be like leveled up enough to successfully, you know, get through the game. Like, it's a decent challenge, etc., etc., right? I don't think you should have to KO wild Pokemon. Like, that's kind of ridiculous to me. Which is why I think the XP share is so brilliant, right? Because, look, if you like grinding, sure, but I'm gonna assume most people don't, because it's boring to do the same thing again and again and again, just to level up someone. You know, Sword and Shield, I think maybe took it a little bit too far with the candies, because I mean, in some instances it's great, because you can just take a hatch Pokemon and, you know, level them up instantly. I think there could have been, like, a little bit of a limit to that. But they had the right idea, right? Because, again, leveling up can be boring unless it's part of playing the game. And I don't count KOing wild Pokemon again and again as part of, like, really playing the game. You know, that's kind of like an extra thing to do to level up. Now, if you don't fight all the trainers, which I definitely did when I was a kid, like, I can understand, like, the game being harder because, you know, you're not leveled up enough, and that's a fine self-induced challenge, right? So, I have no problems with the XP share. You know, I actually had a little bit of trouble, I think, in Sword and Shield, at least on the second gym, just because of the type leveling. But on the other hand, I think it can easily break a game. Like, I remember playing through Ultra Sun and Moon, as I got wrecked by the like the water girl, or boy girl, I don't even know, and they were like, they just kept destroying me, you know, with their freaking Dupiter or whatever it is, and I just couldn't do anything about it, because, like, you couldn't catch any good, like, and I could be remembering this wrong, but I remember, like, I literally lost, like, 20 times in a row, because I didn't have enough, like, type effectiveness. the Pokemon weren't strong enough in the wild for me to, like, level up without, you know, spending hours on it, and I just gave the game up there. I was like, screw this, like, this is not fun, this is boring and awful. It was just not a good game. Like, Sun and Moon were great, but they just didn't change anything, and, you know, the Ultra Sun, Moon, or whatever it's called. It just wasn't that fun. As for my favorites, that's a hard one. I mean, this is probably my most nostalgic for the time period, because this is kind of like, you know, when you could really get into Pokemon and we're old enough to kind of like understand and read everything and all that stuff. I mean, Pokemon Emerald is, of course, an absolute classic. And might be one of my favorites, like, critically, I think. It's a pretty well done game, especially for all the stuff they added. Red and Blue was obviously my first, but nowhere near my favorite. Gold and Silver are probably my most nostalgic, even though the leveling system is kind of busted in that game, I think, because, you know, you have to go fight the Kanto afterwards. Like, it was hard to do. And that's one of the reasons it's so good, right, is the fact there were 2 regions. Oh man, like, for its time, that game was mind-boggling. And I love Johto. Johto is so, like, nostalgic and has so much atmosphere, and the music is so good. Oh wow, these guys are leveling up. Dang. Gotta pay attention now. Yeah. And I loved Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Those were fantastic remakes. So good. So yeah, I liked Gold and Silver quite a bit when I was a kid. Ruby and Sapphire were classics, but of course Emerald I think is superior. And then Diamond and Pearl were interesting too, because that was a time for me when people started losing interest in Pokemon, so I was kind of the only one to be playing it. So I never really got to do all, like, the underground stuff and the wireless communication and all that fun thing. All those fun things. But I love the atmosphere region of the 4th games. Like, Platinum is really, really good. Although, again, it does get a little formulaic with, you know, you can only play, you know, so many combinations of the same team again and again. Like, Platinum with a randomizer is very fun. It's just the game is annoyingly slow, as I'm sure a lot of people remember. Like, especially the battles. Like, that's actually a kind of funny contrast, too, between the 4th and the 5th games, is, like, 4 is so slow with, like, the HP bar. Oh, there's that one video of, like, someone one-hit killing, like, a Blizzy or something, and it takes, like, a minute for its HP bar to go down, and then it uses a full restore because it, like, hangs on or something, and then it takes, like, another minute just for it to, like, restore. It's awful, and it's like, come on, guys, like, you know, maybe the engine just can't handle it. I don't know what the problem is, but it's just, it's annoyingly slow.